Today I wanted to cover ankle to knee, sometimes called Agni Stambhasana, meaning fire log, or sometimes called double pigeon in certain lineages. I don't want you to get too caught up on the names for it, just trying to provide a frame of reference, since some of you might be coming from Jivamukti lineage and some of you might be coming from other lineages. So I like the name Agni Stambhasana because to me the position of the legs resembles that of a stack of fire logs, right? And so that to me evokes a feeling of what the pose is meant to sort of be like, or what the essence of the pose is. So Agni Stambhasana. Now, there are many attributes to Agni Stambhasana. First and foremost is, all right, wait, hang on. Let me start over. When we're looking at Agni Stambhasana, or fire log, or sometimes we call it ankle to knee, there are many things to consider. Now, I'm gonna save some modifications for a bit later on, so don't worry. Even if Agni Stambhasana is a bit unapproachable or a bit difficult for you, I will be offering some modifications momentarily. But first, I want to look at some of the sort of alignment principles that we have going on. So, first and foremost, this is a difficult asana, okay? So, if everything isn't coming together sort of the way that you think you might like it to, don't worry. Again, I'm going to offer some modifications, some other ways to practice, and hopefully that will bring about a better experience of the asana for you. Now, first and foremost is the position of the legs. So you'll notice it's very different than just a cross-legged position. Usually when we sit cross-legged, the knees are quite wide, the feet are on the inside of the knees. But with Agni Stambhasana, we want the legs to almost become sort of this like square shape underneath us. So we want to very much narrow the knees so that, for example, I want sort of the bony part of my right ankle to be over my left knee. And then I have to do something else too. I have to move the left foot a bit more forward so that my right knee is directly over my left ankle. Notice that my foot is not inside of the knee. That's not ankle to knee. That's something else, maybe heel to knee or something like that. So first, we have to really concentrate on getting that ankle all the way across, all the way over the knee. Usually in like the least comfortable, imaginable spot you can find, where kind of the ankle-y part is pushing up against the knee part. If it's too uncomfortable, just that pressure of the bone of the ankle against the knee, you could put something between them to sort of give you extra padding, but I would recommend doing that instead of compromising the shape of the geometry, because here we're getting a different angle on the legs and we're actually not accessing the same muscle groups as when the knees are wide versus knees narrow. So first of all, if we really want to get to the point of the asana, if we really want to understand the essence of the asana, that is one of the parts of it. So, and again, I'm at least working towards having sort of the sharp part of the shins parallel to one another and parallel to the front edge of my mat. Again, if these things aren't happening right away, there's always ways to work towards these goals, but keep in mind, you want to keep in mind where you're going so that you're not inadvertently holding yourself back from progressing. Another important aspect is the shape of the feet. So many times we either let the feet relax, or even more, we let the feet, we call this sort of sickling in layman's terms. We let the feet sickle. Now that's not the shape we're going for. Some would say that it also may put more pressure on the knees. It depends who you are. Everybody's knees are different. Everybody's knees are going to have a different level of sensitivity. But having very active feet, it does add a level of protection for the knees. So again, there's no guarantee of, one person's knees are going to be this way, one person's knees are going to be this way. But in general, it's a good idea to flex the feet in order to sort of stabilize the knees so there isn't sort of an extra torque, extra force on the knees in a direction we don't like. So, in order to have the shape of the feet, not only do I want to not see the soles of my feet. So, if you're looking down and you see the bottoms of your feet, that's not the right shape. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the big toe mound of my foot away from each other. So it's like I'm reaching my big toe mounds towards the opposite walls to almost disappear the soles of my feet, both feet. So sometimes it's easy to forget about that bottom foot there, but I want to make sure that I'm having sort of Tadasana feet. Like imagine, if I were to go back to sort of, let's call this sickling for today because I don't want to get into the crazy anatomy language for it, but if I were sickling the feet, right, that's not Tadasana feet. If I were to stand up and make the same shape with my feet, it would look something like this. So even just from the baseline principle that we're looking for sort of the Tadasana shape in the legs, then in order to have Tadasana shape in the feet, I want it to almost look like the feet are sort of standing on opposite imaginary walls. You can sometimes use like a block and like put the surface of the block up against the foot to help bring about a feeling of what that feels like inside. And furthermore, I'm almost cutting my pinky toe edge of my foot down into the floor such that the skin between my ankle and my heel is lifting up away from the floor. Let's see if you can see it. I know it's a little bit challenging on the videotape, but if you see the skin between the heel and the ankle is touching, and then if I karate chop my foot into the floor, then the outer edge of my foot is touching the floor. The ankle bone may be touching the floor, but this skin in between is not on the floor. So those are a couple of ways to sort of get your mind around maneuvering the feet in this way. Let's switch legs. Ooh, okay. Even just sitting in this position is challenging. So this asana can be incredibly challenging for a number of reasons, but a lot of us struggle with hips and either lateral rotation or flexion. So here are some things that can help us. Oh, firstly, when you're setting up, try to avoid pulling the buttock flesh out of the way. In some circumstances, that may be helpful. But I would say that in this asana in particular, it is the opposite of what we think. It's doing the opposite of what we think it's going to do. I think the reason we may do it is because sometimes we do that in other forward folds. Sometimes we feel like then we can feel our buttocks more against the earth. But it's not such a great idea. The main reason being is that in the upper legs, we are working on trying to externally rotate or laterally rotate the upper legs. If I reach underneath and I move my buttock flesh out of the way, what that's doing is that's ever so subtly internally rotating or medially rotating the upper leg. So it's kind of you're kind of giving your legs mixed signals, giving your hips mixed signals. We don't like mixed signals. We like clarity and transparency and truth. So to undo whatever I've just done, I'm actually just going to kind of lift my seat up and sit back down, which puts my buttock flesh back underneath me. If I feel I need to make an adjustment, because sometimes the best way to undo a habit is to replace it with a different habit. If I need to make an adjustment, try manually rolling the thighs outwards so that you're giving the legs the same signal that you think you're giving them, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's relax for a moment. Ooh-wee. So as I mentioned, this is not always very accessible. At first, it may not be accessible for the duration of your asana practice. But here are some modifications and some ways to work with it that hopefully will bring about an experience of the asana, even if the shape itself feels distant. Okay, so first of all, I often see people taking a modification that involves having the bottom leg straight and having the top leg bent. I encourage you to go ahead and do this with me. So you're going to have the top leg as if it's in Agni Stambhasana. So essentially it's almost like a Janu Shirshasana, but with the leg ankle crossed over. And then the bottom leg is straight. And then go ahead and fold forward. And from inside your body, I just want you to evaluate your physical experience. What is the main experience that I'm having? And what parts of the body are kind of more, have more sensation in them? What parts of the body have less sensation in them? So go ahead and lift up. So for me, I'm not saying this is the case for everyone, but for me, the majority of what I'm experiencing is in the back of the extended leg, the hamstring, the calf. In other words, most of the stretch sensation seems to be happening here for me, which means that while that might help me in terms of making progress on my extended leg, it doesn't feel like it's doing all that much for me in the hips, and especially in terms of that lateral rotation, that external rotation and flexion. So we want to choose modifications based on, are they getting us closer to where we want to go eventually, or are they bringing about at least a similar sort of sensation or inner experience as the original asana? So for me, this doesn't do it for me. It may do it for some. This isn't a substantial external rotating hip experience for me. So I would recommend One option is to actually lean back on the hands and set the foot on the floor. And then from the inside of my body, I'm kind of pushing my knee like away from my midline. Now, even as a person with fairly flexible hips, I can feel that external rotation. I can push my chest closer to my leg to get more of the flexion aspect of it. So this to me gives me more sensation in the place I'm expecting it than this, right? You can even take the same shape and lay on the back with it. And again, you can pull the knee and the legs in closer if you want more sensation, or not. If you don't, keep that upper foot flexed a lot, because again, you don't want to be putting pressure on the knees in a direction that we don't want it to happen. Here's another wonderful variation as you're working towards Agni Stambhasana, is to actually cross the shins. But as I mentioned in the beginning, if we cross the legs the regular way, sort of with the feet crossed and the knees wide, that's adding directions and dimensions to it that Agni Stambhasana doesn't have. So the trick to this modification is to have the feet like much wider than you might normally have them. In fact, I can almost like see the skin of the sole of my foot past each knee. So again, I'm looking for that quite square shape, which is getting me a bit closer to the eventual Agni Stambhasana shape. And so the knees are a bit narrower than will feel natural. In fact, at first, this is going to feel so weird and unnatural and uncomfortable, and that's okay, right? In yoga class, we try a lot of things that feel uncomfortable at first. So I'm really crossing sort of at the fleshy part of the calves. My feet are really wide, and again, I'm flexing both feet the way that we reviewed earlier on in the practice. And then, to whatever extent is possible, I can fold the upper body towards the legs. And again, for me, even with a fairly open set of hips, even for me, this brings me sensation into the places where I'm sort of expecting it or wanting it to come about in ankle to knee. And I'm actually getting a pretty good stretch there. I'm getting a pretty good stretch, even as a fairly flexible person. Now, if you're uber flexible, different story. I can talk to you about that later. But this is a great variation for those that that are struggling with the flexibility required to make it to an Agni Stambhasana shape. So again, legs are crossed, the fleshy part of the calves is kind of pushing up against one another, which feels weird. The feet are almost past the opposite knees, so it feels very, very awkward and strange. And then I can fold forward over it. And again, I'm getting a stretch in all the right places for this asana. So I'm always looking for that when I design modifications. I'm looking for like how close can I get to the essence of the original asana, and how close can I get to bringing awareness into the same areas as the original asanas. That's how I kind of formulate or explore modifications. If as you're moving into an Agni Stambhasana shape, but you have a lot of space still between the legs, that's okay. You do want to fill that space so that you're not folding forward and just leaving the knees out to dry, right? So you want to put space You want to fill the space under the bottom knee if that's where the space is, or under the top knee if that's where the space is. Now there's going to be a little bit of movement, like when I start to go forward, the upper body is going to sort of push the leg a little bit closer to the heel. But you again, you don't want to just hang forward with a big amount of space there. So contact is good. One of the reasons that contact is good is that it actually helps the muscles feel safer. So if I'm hanging out in space, my hips will subconsciously tense in order to protect my knee, which is floating in the atmosphere, which is doing the opposite of what we want to do, right? If I'm gripping in those same muscles that I'm trying to open, then I'm actually being counterproductive. So having something under there, that at least gives the hips enough feeling of security and safety and groundedness that then I can allow that hip crease to relax into it and encourage a further opening. And then over time, you could change the amount of, I could change this to a blanket or to a towel and then progress from there. Another great thing to do if you have no props around, I'm going to switch legs again. This has been quite a hippie class, a hippie session. Another great thing to do, even if you have no props around, you don't need them. You can start even just by having the hands behind and just work on lifting the chest. And I don't know if you can see from your angle, but just in me pushing my fingertips into the ground, my knee starts to go downwards quite a bit towards my leg. And if I'm still upright, again, there's not the same concern about folding forward. If I'm lifting upright and I'm staying lifted and I'm just working inside on pushing the knee down, there's not as much of a concern about there being space there. So one thing to keep in mind. Another thing, if you have no props around, or if you're not sure, if there's nothing in your space that's usable, I like to make a basket with my hands and kind of cradle the knee. And then from inside my body, I'm going to kind of push the knee down into my hands, and the hands are holding. So it's like the knee is pushing against the hands and the hands are pushing against the knee. So it's creating a little bit of an isometric situation happening inside the hips. And then as I relax that, maybe my leg will relax a little bit lower down towards the other knee. But again, since I'm cradling the knee with my hands, I don't have to be so concerned, because I'm giving the knee a sense of safety by creating this little hammock or basket around the knee. And so you can do that progressively. You can push, and then relax. See if the knee will go a little further down, and then again, push, and then relax. See if the knee will go a little further down, and then again, push against the hand. 3 times. 3 times is a magic number, and relax. Oh, okay. Well, that was probably more than you ever wanted to know about Agni Stambhasana. Certainly spending 25 straight minutes in Agni Stambhasana was a journey for all of us. And those are both some alignment points and some modifications for you and your students, for all the teachers out there. I hope this is helpful. If you have a fresh knee injury or even an old one, you should definitely check with your physician and just make sure that in particular is okay on the knee. And, again, if not, then, if you are recovering from injury, then the best idea is likely to be a version on the back where there isn't quite so much load or pressure coming from the situation. So, again, I hope this is helpful. I hope this gives you a starting point or a newfound appreciation for a very, very challenging asana, Agni Stambhasana. Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.